Hello, this is Dr. Ogilvy, and I'm making two videos. One to review the image questions on Part A, and the other one to review the image questions on Part B in the midterm. Before I begin, I want to bring to your attention of a children's book that in the United States and Canada is known as Where's Waldo? And in England, it's known as Where's Wally? And it's a series of detailed double-page spread illustration depicting dozens or more people doing a variety of amusing things at given locations. And the readers are challenged to find Wally hidden in the group. How is this related to histology? Well, it's patterns. These double-page spread illustrations, where you can see here, are various patterns. Like there's a football stadium. You all recognize that immediately. And the challenge is, first of all, recognize the pattern that you're very familiar with. Why are you familiar with? Because you went to many football games, and it doesn't take very many visits, but other places that might say, here's a carnival, et cetera, things like that. But you recognize immediately these patterns. And my point is that histology has to do in part with pattern recognition, the pattern of loose connective tissue, the pattern of dense irregular, the pattern of stratified squamous, non-keratinized epithelium. And as you're learning organs, the pattern of the lung, the liver, the spleen, the kidney. And of course, you need to associate the function and the relationship with other patterns to given patterns. So you can actually buy a game that you can play on your PC, iPad, iPhone. Not sure you want to do that, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention before I go into the first image here in the question that asks on Part A of the midterm. It said, blood flows from the vascular structure with the letter X in its lumen into what vessel? Well, first of all, many of you misread the question and you answered arteriole, but that was not the question. The question was, where does the blood go from this vessel? Well, if you recognize arteriole and read the question correctly, you would have had to say capillary, or you could have said capillaries. Recognizing the arteriole was apparently not a problem for many of you. You just misread the question. The nearby vessel here that has irregular lumen is a vein, and it's a small vein. It's not a venule. A venule only has one very thin layer, as in this vessel here that I'm outlining, or this one here, or this one, or this one. These are all venules. And then when they're very tiny, not too much larger than a capillary, they are post-capillary venules. Okay, so that's the first question. This question presented tonsil with two lymphatic nodules encircled, and these are secondary nodules because you can see a light center to them. And we know it's tonsil because we see it associated with this epithelium, which is multiple layers, stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, and this is a tonsil pit. And so the question was, name the dominant cell type in the encircled structures. Well, the dominant cell type truly is a lymphocyte, but you have to be more specific than that. Many did say and answered lymphocyte, but that is not correct because it's not specific enough. We accepted a variety of answers, and you can see them here. We accepted any variation that had B cell in it, lymphoblasts, lymphocytes, etc., etc. Now, some people actually put keratin or stratum corneum, etc., etc. And this reminds me to remind you that some of you even misread this question. And so let's go on to the next question. This question, everybody did very well. Actually, 90% of the class answered correctly, and the answers to the question, which stated in one word, what is the shape of the cells at the surface of this tissue? And they are flat, and you can see that mostly by the shape of the nucleus. It's a flattened nucleus, and that indicates a squamous cell. So we accepted either squamous, flat, or flattened. And we actually went beyond that and accepted squamous epithelium because, and truly, that's okay. If you answered stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, that's incorrect, because we asked the question as the shape of the cell. So let's go on to the next question. This question presented a very nice longitudinal histological section of a long bone with the epiphysis here, and in the center you can see developing bone. And here's another projection from the bone that's forming. It's going to form the greater trochanter process, and that is still all cartilage with a few islands of bone forming. And then this is the epiphyseal plate right here. And what we did is we made a little box in the middle of the bone marrow and enlarged it. And you can see here the bone marrow cells. Now we gave you, a micron marker bar here where you can see these cells are at least 50 microns. And this one is probably more than 50 microns. And those are the cells that we were asking about. And we said examine the two images, noting that the right image is enlargement. And then we said identify the cells indicated by the arrows. And these are megakaryocytes. You could have answered one of two answers, megakaryocyte or megakaryocytes. Now, only 44% of the class got this correct because many people put things like monocyte, red blood cells, osteoclasts, osteoblasts, and even lymphocytes, none of which are correct. Notice these are large cells. Notice that there's only one nucleus, but it's huge. It's polyploidal. You have to have a lot of DNA to take care of the cytoplasm of this large cell, which is a megakaryocyte that produces platelets. So hopefully you'll review that and know the difference between an osteocyte, an osteoblast, a megakaryocyte, and certainly red blood cells and lymphocytes. All these are either lymphocytes or other developing blood cells that are much smaller. Now to the next question. In this question, you were presented a low magnification of cardiac muscle tissue, that is cardiac myocytes or striated cardiac muscle. And on the right, there was an enlargement of the boxed-in area, which clearly shows acidophilic or a pink staining cytoplasm, in which you can just barely see some striations, and you can see the nucleus is in the center of the cell, and you can also see these darkened areas going across the cells, and those are intercalated discs, and you can even see a branch here of a cell. So all the features of cardiac muscle were present, but the question stated in what organ is this tissue dominant? And most of you, about 91%, answered heart. But some people answered cardiac myocyte, which means you misread the question. Some people even said epidermis, which is way off. And a couple other people put, let's say, esophagus, and I think I saw one person put prostate. It's very important in an exam to know the context of the content in which you are being examined. And we haven't even studied esophagus at that point or the reproductive glands. And so maybe that is an important point for some of you to remember. Okay, so I'm going to the next question now. This question presented a cross-section of a nerve fascicle where the arrows were pointing in the limit of the fascicle, which is enclosed and wrapped by perineurium. And within it we had a box, and on the right was an enlargement, and you can see these small rounded structures that have a dark dot in the center of them. This should remind you of a nerve tissue, and these should remind you of nerve fibers. Now, the question stated the structures in this enlargement are, and we wanted, first of all, nerve fibers or nerve fiber. However, and with those two answers in the key, only 42% of the class got credit. However, after we looked at what you put in, we found that we could accept. Oh, I'm going to have to pause this and get this straightened. We found that we could accept myelinated nerve fiber, singular plural, myelinated axon, singular plural, and nerve axons. Now, when we did that, you can see that the percent answering this question correctly went up to 74%. Some people put nucleus, and that is definitely incorrect. Others put perineurium, which means you misread the question. Others put, Schwann cell or Schwann cells, and that's incorrect. We didn't ask about that. We asked about the entire structures here. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next question. In this question, you were presented with a stratified squamous, non-keratinizing epithelium with the basement membrane being here and loose connective tissue here, and the epithelium from this point on out. And the question was, the cell at number 1 produces what? And there are only two possible answers, melanin or melanin pigment. If you answered Langerhans cells, of course they don't produce anything, but these would be Langerhans cells with the irregular nucleus and the light cytoplasm, almost not staining within the stratum spinosum. But the melanocytes are always in the stratum basale. You can even begin to possibly see a process going up here. And so with this question, 76% answered correctly. But we did have some answers like basal cell, that's not correct. Merkel cell, that's not correct. We had some answered thrombin even, and some answered keratinocytes, that's not correct. So I just mentioned a few of the incorrect answers, but for the most part, the majority of the class did well in this question. I'm going to go to the next question now. This question used the same image, marked a little differently with the layers of the keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. And the question was, name the component of layer 5 responsible for acidophilia. Well, the answer, the very direct and correct answer would be keratin. However, we did accept keratinized epithelial cells. And in reviewing and looking at, once again, the choices that were entered, we found that we could accept dead cells of keratin. Actually, only one student answered that, so we will be regrading shortly and accepting that answer. But if you answered for the layer, stratum corneum, or things like that, that's not correct. We asked what was responsible for the acidophilia, and you had to mention keratin in some way. So let's go on to the next question now. This question presented an image of striated cardiac muscle tissue. You can see those characteristics very clearly here with the central nucleus, the striations, and the branch cells. And we indicated these dark lines here, and those are intercalated discs. That's the correct answer. We accepted singular and plural with the disc spelled either with a C or a K. And actually 86% of the class answered correctly on this, requiring no regrading. Other answers were Z disc, that's incorrect. Sarcomere, that's incorrect. Actin filament, incorrect. Z-band, etc., etc. So those are a few of the incorrect answers. Let's go on to the next question. This question presented the same image again, where we asked what organ this tissue is located in the right, which was heart, but we asked this time the cell type that makes up the the specimen on the left and we put the enlargement on the right, and these are cardiac myocytes or cardiac muscle cell, cardiac striated muscle cells, and actually 77% of the class got this correct, and we regraded, allowing 3 more answers. But just to show you, and I'm going to pause this so I have this position best. So this shows you the initially we accepted what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Sometimes we have to think of all kinds of variations of an answer you would type in. And in addition to that, after reviewing the answers you actually typed in, we found 3 more that we could add. So every quiz has been regraded with all of these answers accepted. But even so, some people put H-band, Z-line, Z-disc. No, I'm in the wrong question. Just a minute. I'm going to pause this. Some folks put cuboidal columnar cells. Others put heart that misread the question. Others put fibroblast, myocyte. So there were a variety of, even some put smooth muscle cells, things like that. But this is clearly an example of combination of not reading the question correctly and also not knowing the characteristics, or as we spoke in the beginning of this video, the pattern recognition. So let's go to the next question. This question, 91% of the class got it correct, and we asked the name of the structures that separate this organ into lobules, and we accepted trabecula, spelled with an A or an AE at the end, stroma, septum, septa, septae, connective tissue septae. But we accepted no other answers, and this is thymus, and you can see all the blue indicates it should remind you of lymphocytes, and the concentration is heavier in the cortex than it is in the medulla, and there are no nodules, so it really pins it down as the thymus. I don't want to spend any more time on this question because it was pretty straightforward. This question once again presented the tonsil and encircled 2 secondary nodules, and we actually asked identify the structure of the 2 examples that encircled, and the best answer would be secondary nodule, secondary lymphatic nodule. You could answer plural, and we even accepted germinal center, singular, and plural, and 80% of the class answered this correctly. But some people answered white pulp, which is clearly in the spleen and not here. Others answered with the cell type, which means you misread the question, B lymphocyte, etc. So let's move on to the next. This question presented a hair bulb, the root area of the hair, and it outlined here the hair papilla. And that's just what we ask about. What is the name of the component of the hair follicle that is contained within the dashed line? We did accept hair papilla, hair follicle papilla, and hair papilla with the ending either in A or AE. We also regraded and accepted dermal papilla. And I just noticed in going through once again the typed in answers that someone answered connective tissue papilla. So I cannot discount that, so we'll regrade accepting that one after I finish this video. Let's move on to the next question. And actually 70 or 88, almost 89% of the class answered correctly on this one. In this question, you were presented with a image, and which is actually a projection of the mucosa of the gallbladder. Now, you haven't studied that yet, but you have studied tissues, and you should have recognized this is simple columnar epithelium here, but the question didn't ask the identification of the epithelium. It asked, identify the specific tissue type enclosed within the dotted line, and that is loose connective tissue. You could have answered loose connective tissue, or areolar. And you can see the multiple nuclei of cells that are spaced somewhat apart. You can see a very light pink staining, reminding you, it should, of collagen, fine collagen fibers, and then some spaces, ground substance. So all the features of loose connective tissue are there. About 67% of the class answered correctly. Some of the incorrect answers were stratified squamous epithelium, that misread the question. Others are lymphocyte. We didn't ask the cell type. Another one was elastic cartilage. That's way off. Dense, irregular connective tissue. That's not correct. Some others answered lamina propria. We didn't ask the region. We asked the tissue type. That is correct. That's lamina propria, but that's not what we asked. So let's move on to the next question. For this question, you were presented two images of the same tissue. It's fibrocartilage, but you were not asked the tissue. You were asked to name the cell type whose dark staining nuclei are arranged in clusters and rows in this specimen. And these are the cells that are arranged in clusters in this specimen here. And this is stained with methanol yellow. You can see the collagen fibers are yellow, and here the collagen is pink. And those, the correct answer that we wanted was either chondrocyte or chondrocytes. And 67% answered correctly. And some of the incorrect answers were like mast cell, nuclei, fibroblasts, monocyte. Some answered fibrocartilage, others answered hyaline cartilage. One person even answered megakaryocyte, another smooth muscle cell. So the question asked the cell type, did not ask the tissue, and let's move on to the next question. This question presented a longitudinal section end of the finger where you can see the epinicium here, the connection of the skin with the nail, and then you can see the nail bed here. The question asked, identify what is a specific name for the layer indicated by number 3 in the enlargement. And the answer we accepted, was dermis, connective tissue, and papillary dermis. And about 80% of the class answered correctly. Some people put epithelial, others put nail bed, nail plate. Those are some of the incorrect answers. So that's, and nail matrix was another one that was incorrect. Some people answered epinicium. So let's move on to the next question. This question presented a specimen of smooth muscle, and it just says simply choose the correct identification of the tissue or type. It was a type in answer, I believe. Anyway, only about 47% of the class answered either smooth muscle or smooth muscle tissue. This is definitely smooth muscle. You can see each of the pink profiles are tapered at either end, and they have the nucleus in the center. And yes, they're in an irregular pattern, so some people put dense irregular connective tissue, but you see in connective tissue, in dense irregular or regular, the nuclei are located outside the pink area because they're in fibroblasts that make the collagen fiber, which is pink. But in this case, the nuclei are in the center. Some folks also put cardiac muscle tissue, and that's totally incorrect because of the tapered cells and the fact they're not the branching, etc. So let's move on to the next question. This question presented a medium magnification of the thymus. You can see a very dark blue staining here and lighter here, and anytime you see this kind of a density of staining of blue, you've got to suggest or suspect lymphocytes are responsible for this. And then you don't see any nodules here, so it rules out spleen and lymph node. And this was thymus, and we asked, the question said, what is the structure within the region encircled that is diagnostic of this organ? And has to be Hassel's corpuscles. We accepted Hassel's corpuscle or Hassel corpuscles. We accepted it with the possessive form or just a plain plural form. In fact, I will show you what we accepted here. You see, all those varieties. And even so, after regrading and accepting those, the percent correct went from 54 to 56% almost. So still, many in the class missed this question. And some of the incorrect answers were cytoreticulum, monocyte, germinal center, white pulp. Some answered only medulla, which is not what we ask. Some answered blood vessel. Some answered germinal cell, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then one person answered splenic nodule. So this concludes the video, and it's right at 25 or a little bit longer. It's a long video, but those of you who have stuck it out, I trust this has been helpful.